Christian imperativism. Christian imperativism is the philosophical position that there is in Christianity an imperative that must be satisfied before we come to faith, as a kind of prelude to or even a measure of faith. An imperative is a necessary condition or precondition. The imperative of the Christian faith is to be positioned on the right side of the boundary between good and evil. Good is not a degree thing. It is not a mark we advance towards. One wins or loses and, in this light, one is saved, or one is not. We cannot have faith and be condemned. We cannot be in the Spirit and be under Satan. How then can we be saved? The Bible tells us that for man this is impossible, yet for God, all things are possible. It is a fundamental truth that mankind cannot contribute to his or her own salvation. We are saved by faith, but even faith is insufficient in this understanding of salvation. If we are saved through no merit of our own, then salvation is made to seem a random and unpredictable event. Understanding that God is not a God of chaos or disorder is not to make the equal if opposite mistake of thinking mankind is a creature capable of finding a way to work out his own salvation. Jesus cannot be needed as a human guide is needed, or he would be in the same situation as Mary or even Buddha. No human is able to serve as a template other than Jesus, and Jesus, while being the supreme example of sinlessness, is not sinless as an inspiration to us, but as a condition of his divinity. But Jesus is not an inspiration to us, because an inspiration is needed. He inspires us, because he epitomizes God. He is not God because he is perfect, as is the case with Buddha. He is God because he is of the same substance as God. Mimicking Jesus does not save us because it is not his perfection that made him God. Nor will mimicking his perfection make us gods. Works are incidental and a symptom, not the mechanism by which we are saved. Works do not save us, but works presage our salvation. Our works that build the church align us towards the grace that ultimately save us. We do not need grace to do good works. We all know the truth. This is called our conscience. When we do wrong, we know it, if we wish to acknowledge it. What is more, we do not need to rely on our own moral nature. Doing evil for others. If we are conscious of others, we will hear the complaints directed against us and alter our ways. This aligns us with the procedure given to us in Matthew 18:15-20. All we need is a minimal sense of decency to be socially acceptable. The social norms keep expectations low, for the most part. However, the trend ought to push the mean towards Christianity. It does not take much, statistically speaking, to improve the group. If only 5% are preachers, and it is men who tend to preach, by having a process that selects out only the best of the best, the average level of preaching will improve. This is why meritocracy is so important. We see this same push towards perfection in sports. DEI does nothing but destroy progress because it begins to select people from the 20% when only a small fraction of that is needed. If you have 100 sharpshooters and only 5 are needed, but only one must meet the qualifications that the 100 met, to be qualified, why strive to be one of the 5 best? What we need is faith, because it is only in faith that we become equipped for salvation. If we do not trust one another, we cannot build the church. The church is not land or buildings, nor the people on the land or in the building. The church is akin to a nation. The nation is not geography, because the land and water existed long before the nation existed. If the devil did anything, he introduced us to liberalism. He invented a false dichotomy that turned opposites into extremes. We are called extremists as an insult, but it is not an insult, it is a conspiracy. If we are extremists, we are connected to liberals, but we have just got carried away. The devil is a moral extremist, in the liberal mind. He does evil, but in the mind of liberals, evil is just getting carried away in the moment. A person burning down a church is an extremist and evil. Liberals admit that, but the arsonist got carried away. He was caught up in the moment, fueled by hate for all the evil things Christian. The absolute is done away with in liberalism. Good and evil are at the opposite ends of a continuum, but it is a continuum. God is perfectly good, in the liberal scheme of things, but he is perfectly matched by a being that is perfectly evil. This means that God and Satan are mirror images of each other, but as equal but opposites, neither actually exist. Liberal extremes are projections. The absolute is always an infinite distance from us. Because of this, any absolute we think of is always an imperfect image. The yin-yang symbol perfectly conveys the idea of the absolute infinity in the liberal worldview. It is an absolute but contaminated with the imperfection of its opposite. In good there is always evil, and in evil, there is always some good. The Bible in liberalism is one way to represent good and evil, but Christians have anthropomorphized good and evil and made them into beings. However, no perfectly good God can exist, and so atheists spend a considerable amount of time and effort demonstrating how God cannot be pure. God created evil, say atheists. God allows evil and so cannot be infinitely good. But if God has any imperfection, he is not God. So, ultimately, the entire project that is relativism is dedicated to proving God as God, has no existential capability. In this they are right. This is the power of atheism and the devil's gambit. God does not exist in the relativist and materialist worldview. We cannot prove God exists, as a relativist extension, because he is not part of his creation. God has even less connection to the devil's conception of things. The depth of this subversion is not even guessed at, let alone fought against. The Christian will argue God exists, but he will not argue that relativism is a failed paradigm. When asked by an atheist to prove God exists, the Christian obligingly attempts to prove God is a viable concept in a relativistic framework, and necessarily fails. No one ever bothers to demand atheists prove physical reality exists. We do not do this even though atheists have known for decades it is impossible. But then how could anyone prove something exists when existence itself is only a probability, and a contingent truth? The very conception of reality as a contingent possibility precludes the possibility of a categorical certainty, let alone faith in God being a viable choice. This ought to open the eyes of any Christian. But how many appreciate the depths of evil that makes it impossible to prove truth exists just to preclude anyone from proving God exists? Atheists would rather live in perpetual doubt about everything, even their own soul, that permit Christians from having a chance of validating the Gospels ourselves if there is truth, because if not, then there is no right and wrong. Law is all we have, and it is nothing but an opinion based on a particular time and place. How do we defend conventional values and traditions if they have no intrinsic value? This is problematical because if there is no truth, then how can it be true that there is no truth? How can relativity be absolute? It is not that liberalism is wrong, it is wrong in an intrinsic and absolute sense. There is no possibility of anything being as wrong as liberalism. Its premise and propositions contradict themselves. Liberalism is akin to claiming there are no statements that are true. We call this an oxymoron because it makes no sense. But why would anything we say make sense? Why would we care about truth? If everything is relative, why do we have any idea of truth at all? Why are we not content to live in absolute chaos? If there was no truth, there would be no sense of truth and no compulsion to find it. But we are attracted to the truth, and the manifestation of truth is order and progress. But there is more. If we are discovering the truth, we are being guided by something integral to reality. Our actions, if in line with the truth, are reimaging truth in novel ways, in what is called innovation. We are adding to the truth things that are contained implicitly in the truth. In the way, new life comes from an amalgamation of existing life. The truth is not stagnant. Truth, like life, must follow its logic, to exist in its fullest sense. We can see physical reality and we can understand physical reality in its natural state. But this reality contains a truth that exists to be revealed. If all we do is reap what exists as is done in subsistence culture, the truth is not in us. Primitive cultures are not primitive because they lack intelligence, they are primitive because they lack a love for the truth and a desire for the truth. The man who sees an arrowhead in a rock reveals a truth. The man who crushes rock sees truth at a still deeper level. We cannot claim that physics is a lower truth than pastoralism. The two truths are not equal. The more one loves truth, the more truth that will be revealed. This is part of the Christian imperative. As Christians, we must uncover the truth, for this is the way we discover God. Primitive cultures did not find God. Nor are they open to the love of the Son. In becoming Christians, they must also enter the realm of civilization. The search for truth is not compatible with the pastoral life. The idyllic image of the hunter-gatherer is in any case misleading. We may have issues with the details of industrialization, but this is only because the movement forward was incomplete, not because the past was in some way better. One might argue that progress is not progress, and that in fact we ought to have remained pastoral or in a subsistence culture that would require an understanding of truth that aligned with the absence of progress towards scientifically verifiable truth. This argument assumes a measure of progress that is indeed quantifiable and morally defensible. This is the index we have alluded to as being the Christian imperative. This is the argument: there is a truth that is progressively arrived at that is consistent with the development of science and technical progress. This is a simple index. It is simply what we know of as efficiency, or the reduction in energy use per unit of value produced. This could also be equated with the elimination of free riding. We see this position alluded to in Matthew 18:15-20. Those who harm others are harming the church. They do not add to progress. The difference between a developed nation and undeveloped is not mass, or volume of matter, it is value added, or what is called equity. A civilized society has a much higher level of value added to the natural world than an underdeveloped one. A lesser developed or agricultural society has added more value to their jurisdiction than a hunter-gatherer society, but far, far less than a modern technological nation. The natural world is not the mankind. We need to process everything we use. This work adds value. We can measure the value of what is added in terms of the work we do. This gives us the labor theory of value. Equity is the value of the work added. No other forms of income are considered because nothing but actual work adds value to the assets of the earth. This is the precursor to Christianity. The person in arrears cannot be a Christian. We have to add value to the earth. This is the Christian imperative.